The subway smell hit Kayla the second she stepped off the train at Grand Central. Metal, sweat, something vaguely like burnt plastic. She pulled her coat tighter and joined the river of people moving toward the exits. Christmas Eve at 6 p.m, and the city pulsed with a different kind of energy. Families dragging oversized shopping bags, couples holding hands, workers desperate to get home before the snow started. Kayla Richardson was none of those things. She was a 28-year-old freelance translator walking into Midtown Manhattan because her most lucrative client had sent an email at noon demanding her physical presence for the first time in 8 months. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out without slowing her pace. Courtney Wells, her best friend since college. The message read, "Please tell me you're not actually working tonight." Kayla typed back quickly. "Emergency contract review. I'll be done by 8. 3 dots appeared immediately. "You're the only person I know who spends Christmas Eve translating legal documents for shady rich people." Kayla almost smiled. Courtney had no idea how shady. Or maybe she did, and chose to ignore it. Either way, Kayla appreciated that her friend never pushed for details she couldn't give. "Not shady," Kayla typed. "Just private." "Right. Because normal businesses definitely need Italian-English translators on retainer who never meet anyone in person." Kayla slipped the phone back into her pocket without answering. Courtney was right, but there were things about this job Kayla had decided not to examine too closely. The pay was exceptional. The work was legitimate as far as she could tell. Contracts, real estate documents, corporate filings. Nothing explicitly criminal. And after 3 years of scraping by on academic translation gigs that paid pennies per word, she wasn't about to walk away from steady income. The building rose in front of her like a shard of black glass. 42 floors. No obvious branding. Just an address in polished steel numbers beside the revolving door. Kayla had looked it up once out of curiosity. The entire structure was owned by a holding company with ties to another holding company, which connected to a third entity registered in Delaware. Standard practice for people who valued discretion. She pushed through the doors into a lobby that smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Marble floors stretched toward a security desk, where 2 men in suits watched everyone who entered. One of them glanced up as she approached. "Kayla Richardson," she said. "I'm here to see the legal department." The guard checked a tablet, nodded once, and handed her a visitor badge. 40th floor. "Elevators are on your left." She clipped the badge to her coat and turned toward the elevators. That was when she saw him. Tall, well-dressed in a charcoal suit that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. Brown hair, green eyes, a smile that seemed designed to put people at ease. He stood near a marble column holding a bouquet of red roses wrapped in clear plastic. Kayla looked past him toward the elevators. She had 3 minutes to get upstairs. "Excuse me." His voice was smooth, practiced. "Are you Kayla Richardson?" She stopped, turned. Every instinct told her to keep walking, but politeness was a hard habit to break. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." He stepped closer, holding out the roses. "My name is Ryan Foster. I'm an attorney with a firm a few blocks from here. I saw you a few weeks ago at a coffee shop in Astoria. You were working on your laptop near the window." Kayla stared at the flowers. Her brain tried to process the situation. A stranger had noticed her at a cafe in her neighborhood, learned her name somehow, and tracked her to this building on Christmas Eve with roses. She searched for a word that wasn't creepy. Unexpected. Ryan's smile widened. "I know how it sounds, but I asked around, found out you do translation work, and when I saw your name on the visitor log here, I thought it was fate." "You saw my name on the visitor log?" Kayla repeated slowly. "I have a client meeting in this building twice a month," Ryan said quickly. "I happened to be walking through the lobby when I saw you check in. I couldn't let the opportunity pass." Kayla glanced toward the security desk. The guards weren't paying attention. She looked back at Ryan. At the roses he still held out like an offering. Every part of this felt wrong, but she also knew that making a scene in the lobby of her client's building was a bad idea. So she did what years of being polite to men who didn't deserve it had trained her to do. She took the flowers. "Thank you," she said. "That's very kind, but I really need to get upstairs." "Of course." Ryan stepped back, still smiling. "Maybe I could take you to dinner sometime. I know a great Italian place in the city. You could help me practice my pronunciation. Kayla forced a smile she didn't feel. I'll think about it. She turned and walked toward the elevators before he could say anything else. The roses felt heavy in her hands. She wanted to drop them in the nearest trash can, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the idea that someone might see and think she was ungrateful. Maybe it was the awareness that she was being watched by cameras and guards, and people whose job was to notice unusual behavior. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside and pressed the button for the 40th floor. As the doors began to close, she saw Ryan still standing by the column, watching her. Then, another figure entered her line of sight. A man in a black suit, taller than Ryan, broader shoulders. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He had been walking toward the elevators from the opposite side of the lobby, but he stopped the moment he saw her holding the roses, saw Ryan watching her. Kayla's breath caught. She had never met Matteo Fontanelli in person, but she knew his face from the research she had done when she first started working for his network of companies. 33 years old, self-made, ruthless in business, connected to families and organizations that operated in shadows. And right now, his dark brown eyes were locked on her with an intensity that made the air feel thin. The elevator doors closed. Kayla exhaled and leaned against the wall. Her hands were shaking. She set the roses on the floor and pressed her palms against her thighs, trying to steady herself. The elevator climbed. Floor numbers ticked by on the digital display. 30, 35, 38. The doors opened on 40. A woman in a sleek gray dress stood waiting. Ms. Richardson? Kayla nodded. Mr. Fontanelli would like to see you in his office. Follow me, please. Kayla bent to pick up the roses, but the woman shook her head. Leave those. It wasn't a suggestion. Kayla straightened and followed the woman down a hallway, lined with dark wood panels and recessed lighting. Offices branched off on either side, some with glass walls, others closed. The few people still working at this hour looked up as she passed, their eyes curious but carefully neutral. The woman stopped in front of a set of double doors at the end of the hall. She knocked twice, waited, then pushed one door open. Ms. Richardson, sir. Send her in. The voice was low, controlled. Kayla had heard it once before on a conference call months ago, but hearing it now, in person, felt different. She stepped inside. The office was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights spreading out in every direction like a glowing grid. A desk sat near the far wall, clean, except for a laptop and a single file folder. Leather chairs, bookshelves filled with legal volumes, and what looked like first editions of classic literature. Matteo Fontanelli stood by the windows with his back to her. Close the door, he said, without turning. Kayla did. He turned slowly, and she got her first clear look at him up close. Photographs didn't do justice to the presence he carried. 6'2", maybe 6'3", athletic build beneath the tailored black suit, strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, dark brown eyes that missed nothing. No scars, no visible marks of violence, but the way he held himself suggested a man who had seen plenty of both. Sit, he said, gesturing to one of the chairs in front of his desk. Kayla sat. She kept her coat on, kept her posture straight. Matteo walked to his desk but didn't sit. He leaned against the edge, arms crossed, studying her with the same intensity she had seen in the lobby. How long have you worked for me? He asked. 8 months, Kayla said. I translate contracts and corporate documents, mostly real estate filings. And in those 8 months, how many times have we met in person? This is the first time. Why do you think that is? Kayla chose her words carefully. You value discretion. I assumed you preferred to keep distance between yourself and the people who handle your paperwork. Matteo's expression didn't change. Who was the man in the lobby? Kayla blinked. I don't know. He said his name is Ryan Foster. He's an attorney. You don't know him, but you accepted flowers from him. He said he saw me at a coffee shop in my neighborhood a few weeks ago. I took the flowers because it seemed easier than making a scene in your lobby. Matteo was silent for a long moment. Then he pushed off the desk, walked to the window and looked out at the city. Ryan Foster works for a firm that represents Russian interests in New York, he said quietly. Shipping, import-export, legitimate on the surface. Underneath, they move money for an organization that has been trying to infiltrate my operations for the past year. Kayla's stomach dropped. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Mateo turned to face her. That's the point. You're a translator. You work remotely. You have no connection to the operational side of my businesses, which makes you exactly the kind of person they would target. Target for what? Access. Mateo's voice was flat. You translate sensitive documents. Legal filings. Contracts with terms that could be exploited if someone knew how to read between the lines. If they could compromise you, turn you into an asset, they could insert errors, change dates, alter addresses, small things that create big problems. Kayla felt cold. You think that's what he was doing? Trying to recruit me? I think he saw an opportunity and took it. Mateo walked back to the desk, picked up the file folder and opened it. He pulled out a photograph and set it in front of her. It was a picture of her, standing outside her apartment building in Astoria. The angle suggested it had been taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. Where did you get this? She whispered. My security team flagged Foster 2 weeks ago when he started following you. Coffee shop, grocery store, subway station. He's been building a profile. Kayla looked up sharply. You've been watching me? I've been protecting my interests, Mateo corrected. You handle documents worth millions of dollars. I don't take chances with people who have that kind of access. So what happens now? Kayla asked. You fire me because someone I've never met decided to stalk me? No. Mateo closed the folder. I make sure they can't get to you. I can take care of myself. Against a man with flowers? Mateo's tone sharpened. Yes. Against an organization that kills people for far less than what you know? No. Kayla stood. I don't know anything. I translate contracts. That's all. You know patterns, Mateo said. You know the structure of my real estate holdings. You know which companies connect to which entities. In the right hands, that information is a weapon. Kayla wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. She had spent 8 months translating documents that revealed exactly how Matteo Fontanelli's empire was built. She knew shell companies, tax havens, legal loopholes. She had never thought of herself as holding dangerous knowledge, but standing in this office, looking at a photograph of herself that she hadn't known existed, she understood that ignorance wasn't protection. What do you want me to do? She asked quietly. Tonight, you don't go back to Astoria, Mateo said. I have an apartment on the Upper East Side. Secure building, limited access. You stay there until we understand the scope of the situation. You want me to just abandon my life because some guy gave me roses? I want you alive, Mateo said. The words were simple. Final. Foster approaching you in my building on Christmas Eve isn't coincidence. It's a message. They know who you are. They know where you live. And they know you're connected to me. Kayla's pulse hammered. This is insane. This is reality. Mateo pulled his phone from his pocket and typed something quickly. A car is waiting downstairs. It will take you to the apartment. You'll have everything you need. Laptop, internet, access to your files. You can keep working. You just can't do it from a place they've already compromised. For how long? Until it's safe. And if I say no? Mateo looked at her directly. Then you walk out of this building, go back to your apartment in Astoria, and hope that the next person who approaches you is just a man with flowers. The silence stretched between them. Kayla thought about her small apartment. The deadbolt that stuck. The neighbor who played music too loud. The coffee shop where she worked most mornings because her kitchen table was too cluttered. She thought about Ryan Foster's smile. The way he had known her name. The photograph Mateo had shown her. This isn't a prison, Mateo said quietly. It's a precaution. You're not my prisoner. You're my responsibility. Kayla met his eyes. I didn't ask to be your responsibility. No, Mateo agreed. But you took my money. You signed contracts with my companies. You became part of my world the moment you agreed to translate the first document. And in my world, I protect what's mine. Kayla wanted to argue, Wanted to tell him she wasn't his. Wasn't anyone's. But the photograph on the desk told a different story. "One night," she said. "I'll stay one night. Then we figure out what happens next." Matteo nodded once. Agreed. He walked to the door and opened it. The woman in the gray dress was waiting outside. "Take Ms. Richardson to the car," Matteo said. "Make sure she has everything she needs." The woman nodded and gestured for Kayla to follow. Kayla picked up her bag and walked toward the door. She stopped beside Matteo, close enough to smell his cologne. Something dark and clean. "The roses," she said quietly. "I left them in the elevator." "Good," Matteo said. "You won't need them where you're going." The apartment on the Upper East Side was nothing like Kayla expected. She had imagined something cold, sterile, a holding cell dressed up with expensive furniture. Instead, she walked into a space that felt lived in despite its obvious luxury. Hardwood floors, wide windows overlooking a tree-lined street, a kitchen with marble counters and copper fixtures, 2 bedrooms, one with a desk already set up with a monitor and keyboard. The woman in the gray dress had handed her a key card and a phone number. "Anything you need, call this line. Someone will answer 24 hours a day." Then she left. Kayla stood in the middle of the living room and tried to process the past 3 hours. Christmas Eve in a stranger's apartment because a man with roses had turned out to be a threat she hadn't seen coming. She pulled out her phone and texted Courtney. "Change of plans. Staying in the city tonight. Long story. I'm fine." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Define fine." Kayla hesitated. "Safe. I'll explain later." She didn't wait for a response. She walked to the bedroom, set her bag on the chair, and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was firm. The sheets were crisp white cotton. Everything smelled faintly of cedar and something clean she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed. Not Courtney this time. An unknown number. She opened the message. "This is Fontanelli. The laptop is secure. Password is on a card in the desk drawer. Work files are already uploaded to the cloud. You won't miss deadlines." Kayla stared at the screen. He had thought of everything. She typed back quickly. "Thank you." No response. She stood and walked to the desk. Found the card exactly where he said it would be. Logged into the laptop and saw her entire directory of active projects waiting. Contracts, legal briefs, a real estate filing due the day after Christmas. For a moment, she felt the absurdity of it all. Sitting in a secured apartment on the Upper East Side, preparing to translate Italian property law while someone she had never heard of 3 hours ago was apparently stalking her. She opened the first document and started working. It was easier than thinking. Christmas morning arrived with pale winter light filtering through the windows. Kayla woke disoriented, unsure for a moment where she was. Then memory returned. The apartment, Matteo Fontanelli, Ryan Foster's smile. Her phone showed 2 missed calls from Courtney and a string of texts demanding details. Kayla sent a quick message promising to call later, then showered and dressed in the same clothes she had worn the night before. She was making coffee in the unfamiliar kitchen when someone knocked on the door. Kayla froze. The apartment was supposed to be secure. No one should be here. The knock came again. Firm. Patient. She walked to the door and checked the peephole. Matteo stood in the hallway holding a paper bag and 2 cups of coffee. Kayla unlocked the door and opened it halfway. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing breakfast," Matteo said. "And information you need to hear." She stepped back and let him in. He set the bag and coffee on the kitchen counter, then turned to face her. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater. No suit. No tie. It made him look younger. Less like the man who had interrogated her in his office, and more like someone who might actually celebrate Christmas like a normal person. "My team finished their analysis overnight," Matteo said. "Ryan Foster has been following you for 2 weeks. We have photographs of him outside your building in Astoria. Video from a cafe 3 blocks from your apartment. Subway footage showing him boarding the same train you take to Manhattan twice." Kayla felt her stomach turn. How was that possible? I would have noticed. "He's good at blending in," Matteo said. "And you weren't looking for him. Why would you be?" He pulled a tablet from the bag and handed it to her. The screen showed a series of images. Kayla outside her building. Kayla at a crosswalk. Kayla sitting in a cafe with her laptop open. When were these taken? She asked quietly. The earliest is from 2 weeks ago. The most recent is 3 days before he approached you in my lobby. Kayla set the tablet down. Her hands were shaking. What does he want? Access to you, which means access to the work you do for me. Mateo picked up one of the coffees and handed it to her. We also found evidence that someone tried to clone your phone. A phishing link sent from what looked like your bank's email address. Did you click on it? Kayla thought back. I got an email about suspicious activity on my account. I started to open it, but the link didn't work, so I deleted it. The link worked, Mateo said. It just didn't finish installing because your phone's security settings blocked it. If it had gone through, they would have had access to everything. Texts, emails, files. Kayla sat down heavily on one of the kitchen stools. This is insane. This is calculated, Mateo corrected. They identified you as someone with access to sensitive information. They researched your habits. They built a profile. And they sent someone charming to make contact in a way that wouldn't trigger suspicion. The roses, Kayla said quietly. The roses were theater, Mateo said. A performance designed to make you feel flattered, off balance, more likely to say yes to dinner, which would have led to drinks, which would have led to Ryan Foster slowly extracting information you didn't even realize you were giving. Kayla wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. The warmth helped. So what happens now? Mateo was quiet for a moment. I've already taken steps to protect your mother in Oregon. She has no idea, and she won't. But there are people watching to make sure no one approaches her. The way Foster approached you. Kayla looked up sharply. My mother? Why would they go after her? Because if they can't get to you directly, they'll look for leverage. Family is always leverage. She doesn't know anything about what I do. Doesn't matter, Mateo said. What matters is that you care about her, which makes her a potential pressure point. Kayla felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't just about her anymore. What else? Your email accounts have been scrubbed and encrypted. Any files you had stored locally have been moved to secure servers. Your phone has been wiped and restored with better security. He paused. And I need you to stay somewhere more secure than this apartment. Kayla frowned. You said this place was safe. It is. But safe and secure are different things. Mateo set his coffee down. This building has good security, but it's not built for the kind of threat we're dealing with. My penthouse in Midtown is. Reinforced structure, limited access. People I trust, absolutely. You want me to move into your home, Kayla said slowly. I want you somewhere I know you're protected, Mateo said. You can keep working. Keep your routine. The only thing that changes is the address. Kayla stood and walked to the window. Below, the street was quiet. A few people walking dogs. A car idling at the curb. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but she knew now that normal was an illusion. How long? She asked without turning around. Until we neutralize the threat. And how long will that take? I don't know, Mateo admitted. But I'm not willing to gamble with your life while I figure it out. Kayla turned to face him. This isn't just about protecting an asset, is it? You're worried about something bigger. Mateo held her gaze. The Russians have been trying to gain ground in New York for over a year. Every move they make is part of a larger strategy. If they're targeting you, it's because they see an opening. I need to close that opening before it becomes a door. And what happens to me when this is over? You go back to your life, Mateo said, with better security, better awareness, and the knowledge that you're not as invisible as you thought you were. Kayla considered this. Every instinct told her to resist, to insist on her independence, to prove she didn't need protection from a man she barely knew. But the photographs on the tablet told a different story. Ryan Foster had been watching her for weeks, had learned her patterns, had waited for the perfect moment to approach. She wasn't invisible. She was exposed. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay at your penthouse. But I need to know what I'm agreeing to. Rules, boundaries, how this works. Mateo nodded. You have your own space, your own bedroom and office. You come and go as needed, but with an escort. No one approaches you without going through security first. You keep working. Keep your independence. The only thing I'm asking is that you let me keep you safe. That's a lot to ask, Kayla said. I know. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mateo picked up the paper bag from the counter and opened it. I brought pastries. You should eat before we go. We're leaving now? The car is downstairs. Kayla almost laughed. You were that sure I'd say yes? I was that sure you're smart enough to recognize a real threat when you see one. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Midtown that Kayla had passed 100 times without really seeing. Glass and steel. Minimalist design. The kind of place that didn't advertise itself because it didn't need to. The elevator opened directly into the living space. Kayla stepped out and stopped. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides of the room, offering views of the city that made her chest tighten. The furniture was dark leather and clean lines. Art on the walls that looked like it belonged in museums. A kitchen separated from the main room by a marble island. Your room is down that hall, Mateo said, pointing to the left. Office is next to it. Bathroom is private. If you need anything, there's a phone on the desk that connects directly to my assistant. Kayla walked slowly through the space, taking it in. Where do you sleep? Other side of the penthouse, Mateo said. You won't see me unless you want to. And if I need to leave? Tell security. They'll arrange an escort. Kayla turned to face him. This feels like a prison dressed up as luxury. It's protection dressed up as common sense, Mateo said. There's a difference. Over the next 3 days, Kayla learned the rhythms of the penthouse. Mateo left early most mornings, dressed in suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He returned late, sometimes after midnight, carrying the tension of whatever he had dealt with during the day. They crossed paths in the kitchen, exchanged brief updates, maintained careful distance, but Kayla also saw things she hadn't expected. The way Mateo took a call from someone's wife and spoke gently about medical bills and time off. The way he read contracts with the same meticulous attention she brought to translations. The way he stood at the windows late at night, staring out at the city like a man carrying weight no one else could see. On the second night, they ended up in the kitchen at the same time. Kayla was making tea. Mateo was reheating something that smelled like Italian food. You cook? She asked. Sometimes, he said. When I have time. I didn't think people like you cooked. Mateo glanced at her. People like me? Rich, powerful, surrounded by staff who probably do everything for you. I grew up in Brooklyn, Mateo said. In a neighborhood where you learned to cook because takeout was expensive and groceries were cheap. Old habits. Kayla poured hot water over her tea bag. I grew up in Oregon, small town. My mom worked 2 jobs. I learned to cook because if I didn't, we didn't eat. Mateo pulled his food from the microwave and leaned against the counter. What does your mother do now? She's a school librarian. Retired last year. Spends most of her time gardening and complaining that I don't visit enough. When did you see her last? Thanksgiving, Kayla said. I flew out for 3 days. It wasn't enough, but it was all I could afford. Mateo was quiet for a moment. The security watching her is discreet. She won't know they're there. And when this is over, I'll make sure she stays protected. Why? Kayla asked. She's not your responsibility. She's your mother, Mateo said simply. Which makes her connected to someone who works for me. That's enough. Kayla studied him. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone colder. More. She searched for the word. Detached. I'm detached when I need to be, Mateo said, but not with people who matter. Do I matter? The question hung in the air between them. Mateo set his food down and looked at her directly. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. On the 3rd day, Christmas had passed into memory, and the city returned to its usual rhythm. Kayla worked through the morning on a complex real estate contract, cross-referencing terms between English and Italian until her eyes burned. She took a break around noon and found Mateo in the living room, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in Italian. Fast, sharp, the kind of tone that left no room for argument. When he saw her, he ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket. Problem? Kayla asked. Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this penthouse concerns me now, she said. I'm living in the middle of your world. I think I deserve to know when something's wrong. Mateo considered this. Then he gestured to the couch. Sit. She did. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. The Russians made contact this morning, he said. Not directly. Through intermediaries. They want a meeting. About me? About boundaries, Mateo said. They know I've moved you under my protection. They're testing to see if I'm willing to negotiate. And are you? No. The certainty in his voice sent a chill through her. What happens if you refuse? They push harder. Look for other ways to get what they want. But they won't touch you. Not while you're here. Kayla wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't ask for any of this. I know. Mateo's expression softened slightly. But you're here now. And I need you to trust that I know how to handle this. I barely know you, Kayla said. Then get to know me. That night, they ate dinner together for the first time. Not by design, but because Kayla emerged from her office at the same time Mateo returned from wherever he had been. He ordered food from a restaurant Kayla had never heard of. Italian. The kind of place that didn't deliver unless you were someone who mattered. They sat at the kitchen island and ate in comfortable silence. Then Mateo asked about her work, and Kayla found herself explaining the intricacies of legal translation in a way she rarely did with anyone. He listened, asked intelligent questions, understood nuances most people missed. When she asked about his day, he hesitated. Then he told her about a negotiation that had gone badly, about an ally who had betrayed a confidence, about the constant calculus of power and loyalty that defined his world. It sounds exhausting, Kayla said. It is, Mateo admitted, but it's also the only life I know. Do you ever want something different? He looked at her for a long moment. Sometimes. When I'm standing in this penthouse at 2 a.m, looking out at a city that never stops moving, I wonder what it would be like to walk away, to be no one, to have nothing at stake. But you don't. No, he said quietly, because walking away doesn't erase what I've built, or the people who depend on me, or the enemies who would see absence as weakness. Kayla understood then. Matteo Fontanelli wasn't trapped by ambition. He was trapped by responsibility. And for the first time since she had walked into his office on Christmas Eve, she saw him not as a threat or a protector, but as a man carrying a burden he couldn't put down. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For keeping me safe. For protecting my mother. For not treating me like I'm fragile. Mateo's expression shifted. You're not fragile, Kayla. You're standing in the middle of a situation most people would run from, and you're still working. Still asking questions. Still fighting for your independence. That's not fragility. That's strength. The words settled over her like warmth, and for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than fear. She felt seen. The morning of December 28th arrived with gray clouds pressing against the penthouse windows. Kayla had been awake since 5, unable to sleep, her mind cycling through the same loop of questions about Ryan Foster and what the Russians actually wanted. She made coffee in the quiet kitchen and carried it to her office, planning to lose herself in work the way she always did when anxiety became too loud. She was halfway through a property acquisition contract when she heard voices in the main room. Male. Low. Speaking too quickly for casual conversation. She set down her pen and walked to the doorway. Mateo stood near the dining table with 3 men she had never seen before. All of them wore dark suits. All of them carried themselves with the kind of stillness that came from training. On the table between them sat a laptop, several folders, and what looked like printed photographs. Mateo glanced up and saw her. Kayla, come here. It wasn't a request. She crossed the room and stopped at the edge of the table. One of the men closed the laptop slightly, as if protecting whatever was on the screen. These are members of my security team, Mateo said. They've been monitoring communications connected to the Russian organization. Last night they intercepted something that requires your expertise. Kayla looked at the folders. What kind of something? One of the men, older than the others with silver threading through his dark hair, opened a folder and pulled out several printed pages. Email exchanges, text messages. All of them use a mix of Russian, Italian, and English legal terminology. We have translators, but none of them specialize in the kind of contract language you work with daily. Kayla took the pages. The text was dense. Fragments of sentences in Cyrillic script, mixed with Italian phrases and English terms she recognized from real estate law. Dates, addresses, references to the event, and updated documentation. "What am I looking for?" she asked. "Anything that connects to you," Matteo said. "Or to my businesses. Patterns, inconsistencies, anything that doesn't fit." Kayla carried the pages to the table and sat down. The men stepped back slightly, giving her space. She read slowly, letting the languages blur together in her mind, the way they did when she was deep in translation work. Russian she understood only in fragments, but the structure of the sentences told her things. The way certain words were emphasized. The placement of legal terms that didn't quite belong in casual correspondence. "This isn't just business communication," she said after several minutes. "It's coded. They're using legal language to disguise something else." Matteo pulled out the chair beside her and sat. "Explain." Kayla pointed to a phrase in Italian. "This term here, it's used in property transfers when you're describing a change in designated use. But in this context, it doesn't make sense. They're not talking about property. They're talking about an event. The New Year's Gala," Matteo said. "Maybe." Kayla flipped to the next page. "But look at this. The word for venue is wrong. It's the formal term you'd use in a contract, not in an email between colleagues. And here, the date format switches between American and European style mid-sentence. That's not a mistake. That's intentional." One of the security men leaned forward. "Why would they code it that way?" "Because anyone intercepting these messages would see business correspondence," Kayla said. "Legal jargon. Property terms. Nothing that raises immediate red flags. But if you know what to look for, the inconsistencies create a second layer of meaning." Matteo was very still beside her. "Can you decode it?" "I can try." Kayla looked at the stack of papers. "But I'll need access to all the documents I've translated for you over the past 8 months. If they're using terminology from your actual contracts, I need to see the source material to understand how they're twisting it." Matteo pulled out his phone and typed quickly. "You'll have everything within the hour." The work consumed the next 2 days. Kayla barely left the dining table. Matteo's team brought her files, emails, intercepted text messages, anything that contained the mix of languages she had identified. She cross-referenced terms, built spreadsheets, traced patterns in the way certain phrases appeared and reappeared across different communications. Matteo worked beside her, not hovering, not questioning every decision, just present. He brought coffee at regular intervals, ordered food she barely touched, answered questions about his business operations when she needed context for what she was reading. On the second night, close to midnight, Kayla found it. "Here," she said, her voice rough from hours of not speaking. She pushed a printed invitation across the table to Matteo. "This is the official invitation to your New Year's Gala, the one your office sent to investors and political contacts 3 weeks ago." Matteo picked it up. "I've seen this. What about it?" Kayla laid a second document beside it. "This is a version that was sent to 6 specific people on your guest list 5 days ago. It looks identical. Same letterhead, same signature, same RSVP information. But look at the address." Matteo's eyes narrowed. He compared the 2 documents side by side. "The street number is different. By 2 digits, Kayla said. "Easy to miss if you're not paying attention. The venue in the official invitation is the Plaza Hotel. The venue in this version is a building 2 blocks away. Older, less secure, probably owned by someone connected to the Russians." One of the security men swore quietly. Matteo set the documents down carefully. They were going to split the event, send key targets to a secondary location, where they'd be vulnerable, Kayla said. No security, no witnesses they couldn't control. Just 6 high-value people walking into what they thought was your gala. How did they get access to the invitation template? Matteo asked. Kayla pulled up another file on the laptop. They didn't. They recreated it. But they used contract language from documents I translated to make it look authentic. Specific phrasing. Legal terms that only appear in your official communications. That's why it feels right, even though it's fake. Matteo leaned back in his chair. The tension in his shoulders was visible even through the expensive fabric of his shirt. They were using your work to legitimize fraud. And if it had worked, Kayla said quietly, 6 people would have disappeared on New Year's Eve, and everyone would have assumed they went to your event. By the time anyone realized the mistake, it would have been too late. The room was silent except for the hum of the laptop and the distant sound of the city beyond the windows. Can we fix it? Mateo asked. Kayla nodded. We sent a correction. A technical update citing a printing error in the original batch. Include the correct address. Make it sound routine. Most people will just update their calendars and move on. And the ones who receive the fake version? They'll think it was a mistake on their end, or they'll call to confirm. Either way, they won't walk into a trap. Mateo pulled out his phone and made a call. The conversation was brief. Italian. Clipped sentences that Kayla didn't try to follow. When he ended the call, he looked at her directly. My assistant is drafting the correction now. It'll go out within the hour with a personal follow-up to the 6 targets. He paused. This wouldn't have been possible without you. You understand that? Kayla felt heat rise in her face. I just read documents. That's what I do. You saw a pattern my entire security team missed, Mateo said. You connected language across multiple communications and identified a threat before it could materialize. That's not just reading. That's intelligence work. One of the security men nodded. He's right. We've been staring at these intercepts for days. We knew something was off, but we couldn't see it. Kayla looked down at the papers scattered across the table. Weeks of work. Hours of cross-referencing. And somehow, she had found the thread that unraveled the entire operation. What happens now? She asked. Now we make sure the event goes exactly as planned, Mateo said. With security that accounts for what we know. And with you protected in a way that makes it clear you're untouchable. I don't need to be at the gala, Kayla said quickly. Yes, you do. Mateo's tone left no room for argument. You're the translator who validated the legitimacy of my contracts with several of the attendees. Your presence confirms that everything is above board, that nothing has changed. You want me to be window dressing. I want you to be visible, Mateo corrected, so that anyone watching understands you're not hiding. You're not compromised. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Kayla wanted to argue, but the logic was sound. If she disappeared now, it would raise questions, create suspicion. The Russians would know their plan had been discovered, and they'd adjust. Find another angle, another vulnerability. Fine, she said, but I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. If I go to this gala, I go as myself, a translator, not arm candy. Mateo's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Agreed. Over the next several hours, they worked through the details. The correction went out. Responses came back confirming receipt. 3 of the 6 targets called personally to verify the address change, which Mateo's assistant handled with smooth professionalism. By dawn on December 30th, the trap had been dismantled before it could close. Kayla stood at the windows, watching the city wake up. Behind her, she heard Mateo dismiss his security team, heard the elevator doors close. Then footsteps approaching. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough that if she turned, they'd be face to face. You should get some sleep, he said quietly. So should you. I will. Eventually, they stood in silence. The city spread below them. Millions of people moving through their lives with no idea what had almost happened, what had been prevented by a translator who knew how to read between lines written in 3 languages. Mateo, Kayla said without turning, why did you really bring me into this? You could have kept me locked in a safe apartment somewhere. Let your team handle everything. I could have, he agreed, but that would have been a waste. Of what? Of you. He shifted slightly, and she felt his hand settle on her shoulder. Not grabbing, not possessive. Just there. Solid. Real. You're not just someone I need to protect. You're someone who can help. And I don't waste assets like that. Kayla turned to face him. His hand fell away, but he didn't step back. They stood inches apart, and she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight of too many hours awake and too many problems solved. Is that all I am? She asked. An asset? Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "No, but it's easier to think of you that way." "Easier than what?" He didn't answer, just held her gaze with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment. "Get some rest," he said. "The gala is tomorrow night, and I need you sharp." He walked away before she could respond. Kayla stood at the windows alone, her shoulder still warm where his hand had been, and wondered what exactly she had just stepped into. The dress arrived at noon on New Year's Eve in a garment bag so elegant Kayla almost didn't want to open it. She had been working in her office when one of the penthouse staff knocked and left the bag hanging on her door without a word. A small card was pinned to the fabric. "Dress code is formal. This should work. M. No flourish. No romance. Just practicality dressed up as consideration." Kayla unzipped the bag slowly. The dress inside was the color of aged wine, deep and rich. The fabric heavy enough to drape without clinging. Long sleeves. A neckline that suggested elegance without demanding attention. It was beautiful in a way that felt deliberate, like someone had thought carefully about what would make her look like she belonged, without pretending to be someone else. She held it up to the light, and wondered who had chosen it. Matteo seemed like the kind of man who delegated everything, but the note was in his handwriting. She recognized it from the corrections he had made on documents over the past few days. The thought that he had picked this himself made her stomach flutter in a way she didn't want to examine. By 7 that evening, Kayla stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom and barely recognized herself. The dress fit perfectly. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders. Makeup, minimal but deliberate. She looked like someone who translated contracts for powerful men and attended their galas without fear. She looked like someone who belonged in Matteo Fontanelli's world. The thought terrified her. A knock on her door pulled her from the mirror. She opened it to find Matteo standing in the hallway wearing a tuxedo that made him look like something carved from shadow and starlight. Black jacket tailored to perfection. White shirt crisp against his olive skin. Dark eyes that swept over her once, lingered, then met her gaze with an expression she couldn't read. "You look ready," he said. "I feel like an imposter," Kayla admitted. "Good. That means you're paying attention." He held out a small velvet box. "One more thing." Kayla took the box and opened it. Inside was a pair of earrings, simple gold studs that caught the light when she tilted them. "They're beautiful," she said. "They're functional," Matteo corrected. "The left one has a microphone. Anything said within 6 feet of you will transmit to my security team. You won't hear anything back. Just wear them and act natural." Kayla looked up sharply. "You're bugging me? I'm protecting you," Matteo said. "There's a difference. If Ryan Foster or anyone connected to the Russians approaches you tonight, I need to know what they say, what they ask, how they try to manipulate the situation." Kayla set the box down on the dresser. "And if I say no, then you stay here while I handle the gala alone. But we both know that's not an option. Your presence matters. It validates the legitimacy of the contracts you've translated. It shows that nothing has changed." He was right. Kayla hated that he was right. She picked up the earrings and put them on slowly, watching herself in the mirror as the small gold studs settled into place. "How do I know you're not listening to everything I say all the time?" she asked. "You don't," Matteo said simply. "You have to trust me." Kayla turned to face him. "That's asking a lot." "I know." The car ride to the Plaza Hotel took 20 minutes through traffic that moved slower than usual because of the holiday. Kayla sat beside Matteo in the back of a black sedan, with windows tinted so dark she could barely see out. 2 security vehicles flanked them, one in front and one behind, forming a convoy that drew stares from pedestrians on the sidewalk. "Is this really necessary?" Kayla asked. "Tonight it is," Matteo said without looking away from his phone. "We dismantled their plan, but that doesn't mean they've given up. They'll be watching to see how we respond, looking for weaknesses, and I'm the weakness." "You're the variable they didn't account for," Matteo corrected. He slipped his phone into his pocket and turned to look at her. "They expected me to hide you, lock you away somewhere safe while I dealt with the threat. Instead, you're walking into the center of it wearing a dress that says you're not afraid." "I am afraid," Kayla said quietly. "Then you're smarter than most people in that ballroom tonight." The plaza rose in front of them like something out of another era. Golden light spilled from tall windows. A red carpet stretched from the entrance to the curb where valets waited to open car doors. Photographers lined the edges despite the cold, cameras ready to capture whoever emerged. "Are they going to take my picture?" Kayla asked. "Probably," Mateo said. "Smile if you want. Ignore them if you don't. Either way, don't stop moving until we're inside." The door opened. Mateo stepped out first, buttoning his jacket with the kind of fluid grace that came from a lifetime of being watched. Then he turned and offered his hand. Kayla took it. The cameras started flashing immediately. Questions shouted in English, and Italian blurred together into noise. Kayla kept her eyes forward and let Mateo guide her up the red carpet with his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Not possessive, just present. Inside, the noise faded into something softer. Music drifted from the ballroom. Voices layered over each other in a dozen languages. The air smelled like expensive perfume and champagne. "Stay close," Mateo said quietly. "I'll introduce you to a few key people, then you're free to move around. But don't leave the ballroom without telling security first." "Do I have security?" 3 people. You won't see them unless you need to." The ballroom was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with scenes Kayla didn't have time to examine. Tables draped in white linen surrounded a dance floor where a live band played something jazzy and sophisticated. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like art than food. Kayla counted at least 200 people. Politicians she recognized from news broadcasts. Business executives whose faces appeared in financial magazines. Women wearing jewelry that could fund small countries. Men whose handshakes carried the weight of empires. And somewhere in this crowd was Ryan Foster. Mateo introduced her to 3 different groups over the next hour. Each time he explained her role simply. "Kayla Richardson. She handles my Italian contract translations. Best in the city." No one questioned it. No one looked at her like she didn't belong. They shook her hand, made small talk about the challenges of legal translation, and moved on to other conversations. It was almost disappointingly normal. By 9:30, Kayla had claimed a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking, and positioned herself near one of the tall windows overlooking Central Park. From here, she could see most of the ballroom, could track Mateo as he moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times. He never looked directly at her, but she felt his awareness. The way his path through the room always kept her in his peripheral vision. The way he angled his body so he could see her, even while talking to someone else. She was taking a sip of champagne when she saw Ryan Foster. He stood near the bar, talking to an older man Kayla didn't recognize. Both of them wore tuxedos that fit well, but lacked the tailored perfection of Mateo's. Ryan laughed at something the older man said, then turned and scanned the room. His eyes found her. Kayla's grip tightened on the champagne glass. She forced herself to look away casually, as if she hadn't noticed him, as if her heart wasn't suddenly racing. She counted to 10, then she glanced back. Ryan was walking toward her. Kayla set her champagne down on a nearby table and straightened her shoulders. The earring in her left ear felt suddenly heavy. She wondered if Mateo's security team was already listening, already tracking Ryan's approach. "Kayla," Ryan said when he reached her. His smile was warm, practiced. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I work for Mr. Fontanelli," Kayla said evenly. "Why wouldn't I be here? I just thought after our encounter at his office, he might prefer to keep you away from public events." Ryan's eyes swept over her dress. "You look beautiful, by the way." "Thank you. I wanted to apologize," Ryan continued. "I think I came on too strong with the roses. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." "You didn't make me uncomfortable," Kayla lied. "You just caught me off guard." "Well, I'm glad I ran into you tonight. Maybe we could talk somewhere quieter. There's a balcony just outside the ballroom. Better view, less noise." Every instinct Kayla had screamed warning. "I'm fine here." "Come on," Ryan said, his smile never faltering. "Just 5 minutes. I promise I won't try to sweep you off your feet again." She said she's fine. The voice came from behind Kayla, low and controlled, and absolutely unmistakable. She turned to find Matteo standing less than 2 feet away. He must have crossed the ballroom in seconds. Must have been watching the entire time. Ryan's smile tightened at the edges. "Mr. Fontanelli, great event. I was just inviting Ms. Richardson to step outside for some air." "Ms. Richardson doesn't need air," Matteo said. His tone was pleasant. His eyes were not. "And you don't need to be talking to her. I didn't realize she was off limits," Ryan said carefully. "Now you do." The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Kayla could see other guests glancing over, sensing confrontation, even if they couldn't hear the words. Ryan raised his hands slightly in a gesture of surrender. No harm intended. "Enjoy your evening, Ms. Richardson." He walked away without looking back. Kayla exhaled slowly. "Did you have to do that?" "Yes," Matteo said simply. He turned to face her fully. "What did he say before I arrived?" "He apologized for the roses, asked me to go to the balcony with him." "And you said no?" "Obviously." Matteo's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Something that might have been approval. "Good. Stay where I can see you for the rest of the night. We're almost done here." He left without waiting for a response, moving back into the crowd with the same smooth confidence he'd arrived with. Kayla watched him go, and realized her hands were shaking. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and music and carefully orchestrated normalcy. Kayla spoke to a few more people, accepted compliments on her dress, deflected questions about how long she had worked for Matteo with vague answers that satisfied without revealing anything. At 11:45, the band shifted into something slower. Couples moved onto the dance floor. Kayla stayed near the windows, watching the city beyond the glass, counting down the minutes until midnight. She didn't see Matteo approach until he was standing beside her. "It's almost over," he said quietly. "Did your team get what they needed?" Kayla asked. "More than enough." Ryan's conversation with his associate at the bar included references to the alternative location and complaints about the address correction we sent. 2 other men made calls mentioning the failed plan. We have recordings of all of it. So what happens now? Now I use those recordings to make it very clear that any further attempts to interfere with my operations will have consequences they don't want to face. Kayla turned to look at him. "You mean you threaten them?" "I mean I negotiate from a position of strength," Matteo said, "which is the only kind of negotiation that matters." Outside, the first fireworks began. Explosions of gold and silver against the black sky. The ballroom erupted in cheers and applause. Couples kissed. Strangers embraced. The band launched into a rendition of a song Kayla didn't recognize. She stood beside Matteo at the window, watching the city celebrate, and felt the weight of everything that had happened over the past week settle over her like a heavy coat. "Thank you," she said quietly, barely audible over the noise. Matteo glanced at her. "For what?" "For not making me feel like a liability. For trusting me to handle tonight." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You were never a liability, Kayla. You were the reason we saw the trap before it closed." The fireworks continued, gold and blue and cascading white light that reflected off the windows and turned the ballroom into something magical. Kayla looked at Matteo's profile, sharp and serious even in celebration, and realized something had shifted between them over the past week. She wasn't sure what to call it yet. Partnership, maybe. Or trust built from necessity. Or something more complicated that she didn't have words for. But standing here on New Year's Eve, watching the city burn bright with possibility, Kayla knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone. January 1st arrived with the kind of cold that made the city feel sharper. Kayla woke in the penthouse guest room to pale light filtering through windows she had grown used to over the past week. The sounds of the city below were muted by glass and distance. Everything felt suspended, like the space between exhaling and taking the next breath. She made coffee and found Matteo already awake at the dining table, shoulders tense over a spread of papers. His phone lay face up beside an unopened envelope, the call running through a single earbud. Italian moved in a low, clipped cadence, too fast to follow, but sharp enough to make her stomach tighten. She caught fragments, names she didn't recognize, references to terms and territories. He glanced up when she entered, and, without breaking stride, tipped his chin toward the fresh pot of coffee on the counter. Kayla poured a cup and sat on one of the stools near the kitchen island. Not quite in the room with him, but close enough to hear when he finally ended the call. "That was fast," she said. Mateo slipped the phone into his pocket. "I don't waste time when I have leverage. The recordings from last night? Among other things." He walked to the counter and refilled his own cup. "I made contact with intermediaries early this morning. Laid out what we have. Made it clear that continued interference would result in those recordings reaching people they'd prefer didn't hear them." Kayla wrapped her hands around her cup. "And they just agreed to back off?" "Not immediately. There was negotiation, posturing, the usual dance." Mateo leaned against the counter across from her. "But by noon, I had confirmation. The Central Russian leadership is pulling back. They're abandoning their New York expansion plans for the immediate future. That's good, right? It's progress," Mateo said carefully. "The organization as a whole has decided I'm not worth the cost of continued conflict. But organizations are made of people, and people don't always follow orders." Kayla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "You think some of them might still come after me? I think the risk has dropped significantly. But in my world, zero risk doesn't exist." He set his cup down. "Which is why we need to talk about what happens next." Over the next hour, Mateo laid out the situation with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. The main Russian operation had agreed to retreat. Ryan Foster had been handed over to his own people, though what that meant specifically, Mateo didn't elaborate, and Kayla didn't ask. Evidence of the attempted fraud at the gala had been distributed to key players as a warning. "The central structure is contained," Mateo said, "but there's always the possibility of independent actors, small cells that operate without direct oversight, people who might see an opportunity for revenge or advancement. So I'm still in danger," Kayla said. "You're in significantly less danger than you were a week ago," Mateo corrected. "The difference is between an organized threat with resources and planning, and the possibility of opportunistic individuals who lack both." He walked to the windows overlooking the city. Morning light cut across his profile, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw and the tension he carried in his shoulders, despite the victory he had just described. "I can keep you here indefinitely," he said, without turning. "Maintain the same security protocols. Keep you isolated until I'm absolutely certain there's no residual threat. But," Kayla prompted, "but you have a life, a home, independence you value." He turned to face her. "And keeping you locked in this penthouse starts to look less like protection and more like something else." Kayla understood what he wasn't saying. The line between safety and control was thinner than either of them wanted to admit. "What do you recommend?" she asked. Mateo pulled out his phone and showed her a document. "Your apartment in Astoria gets upgraded security. Cameras installed at all entry points. New locks. Monitored alarm system that connects directly to my team. There will be a car on your street 24 hours a day with 2 people who know your face and your routine. You'll have an emergency contact that gets you immediate response if anything feels wrong." Kayla scanned the document. The level of detail was staggering. Entry protocols. Evacuation routes. Response times calculated to the minute. "This seems excessive for someone who's no longer in immediate danger," she said. "It's proportional to the value of what I'm protecting," Mateo replied. "I'm a translator. You're someone who helped dismantle a threat to my operations. That makes you worth protecting regardless of your job title." Kayla looked up from the phone. "And if I want to go back? To my apartment, my routine, my life? Then you go back," Mateo said simply. "With the security measures in place. With the understanding that you call if anything feels off. And with the knowledge that this isn't me abandoning responsibility. It's me trusting your judgment." The weight of that trust settled over Kayla like something physical. For the past week, Mateo had made every decision about her safety, had controlled her environment and her movements with absolute authority. Now he was handing that control back to her, not because the threat had vanished, but because he believed she was capable of navigating what remained. "When can I leave?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready. The security upgrades are already complete." Kayla blinked. "You did all of this before asking me?" "I prepared for the most likely outcome," Mateo said, "which was you choosing independence over indefinite protection. You think you know me that well? I think I've watched you fight for autonomy since the moment you walked into my office on Christmas Eve. You took the roses because it was easier than making a scene, but you hated every second of it. You agreed to stay in the safe apartment because it was logical, but you never stopped questioning the necessity. You worked beside me on the intercepts because you wanted to contribute, not because I ordered you to. He paused. So yes, I know you well enough to predict you'd choose your own life over mine the moment it was safe to do so. Kayla wanted to argue, but couldn't. Everything he said was accurate in a way that felt both validating and uncomfortably exposing. I'll pack my things, she said quietly. By mid-afternoon on January 2nd, Kayla was back in Astoria. Her apartment looked exactly as she had left it a week ago. Coffee mug in the sink, laptop on the table, stack of mail she hadn't collected from the lobby. But everything felt different. The new cameras were subtle but visible if you knew where to look. The locks were heavier, more substantial, and when she looked out the window at the street below, she could see the black sedan parked 3 buildings down, 2 figures visible in the front seats. She unpacked the small bag she had taken to the penthouse and tried to settle back into her routine, checked emails, responded to client inquiries, made tea in her own kitchen using her own mugs. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like wearing clothes that no longer fit quite right. Her phone buzzed with a message from Courtney. Are you back yet? I'm going insane not knowing what happened. Kayla typed back. I'm back. I'll call you tomorrow. Promise. She spent the rest of the day working, translating a contract for a client in Chicago, reviewing terminology for a legal filing, normal work, safe work, the kind of thing that used to fill her days before Matteo Fontanelli's name appeared in her inbox 8 months ago. By evening, she was restless. She made dinner she didn't really want and ate it standing at the counter. Checked the cameras on her phone through the app Matteo's team had installed. Everything was quiet, normal, exactly as it should be. She went to bed early and didn't sleep well. January 3rd passed in similar fashion. Work. Messages from Courtney she promised to answer soon. Long stretches of silence broken only by the sounds of her neighbors and the city beyond her walls. The security team changed shifts at 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. She watched them from her window without meaning to, tracking their movements the way she now tracked everything. At 8 that evening, someone knocked on her door. Kayla checked the peephole and felt her heart stutter. Matteo stood in the hallway holding a manila envelope and wearing dark jeans and a black coat instead of his usual suit. He looked different outside the context of the penthouse, more human, less untouchable. She opened the door. What are you doing here? Delivering final paperwork, Matteo said, holding up the envelope. Updated contracts. Payment for the past week. I thought it would be easier to bring them in person than send them through channels. It was a lie. They both knew it was a lie. Matteo Fontanelli didn't deliver paperwork personally. Kayla stepped back and let him in anyway. He walked into her small living room and looked around with the same careful attention he brought to everything. She saw him take in the mismatched furniture, the stack of books on the coffee table, the translation dictionaries lined up on the shelf beside culinary magazines, and framed photographs of places she had visited before her life became consumed by work. It's smaller than I expected, he said. Not everyone lives in penthouses, Kayla replied. I didn't mean it as criticism. He set the envelope on her kitchen counter. It suits you. Personal. Unpretentious. Kayla crossed her arms. You didn't come here to comment on my apartment. No, Matteo admitted. He turned to face her fully. I came because I wanted to make sure you were actually okay. That returning here was the right choice. You could have called. I could have. He didn't move closer, but his presence filled the small space in a way that made the apartment feel even smaller. But I needed to see it for myself. See what? That you're safe. That the security measures are working. That you're not regretting the decision. Kayla studied his face, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands stayed loose at his sides, even though every line of his body suggested coiled readiness. This wasn't just a boss checking on an employee. This was something else. Why does it matter so much? She asked quietly. Matteo was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower than usual. Rougher. Because when I saw you holding those roses in my lobby, something in me went cold. Not angry, Not strategic, just cold. Like someone had taken something that was supposed to be mine, and I hadn't even realized it mattered until it was threatened. Kayla's breath caught. I'm not yours. I know. He took a single step closer. Which is why I'm standing here instead of demanding you come back to the penthouse. Why I'm giving you space instead of assigning guards to your door. Why I'm trying to do this the right way. Even though every instinct I have says to lock you somewhere I know you're absolutely safe. This? Kayla repeated. What is this? I don't know yet, Mateo said. But it's not just business. It stopped being just business sometime between you decoding those intercepts and standing beside me at the gala looking like you belonged there. Kayla felt something twist in her chest. You're my employer. I am. Which is why I'm not going to touch you tonight. Not going to push for something you might feel obligated to give because of the power imbalance between us. He held her gaze steadily. But I need you to know that what I felt when I saw Ryan Foster approach you wasn't professional concern. It was personal. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The honesty in his voice cut through every defense Kayla had built over the past week. She thought about the way he had worked beside her in the penthouse. The way he had trusted her intelligence instead of just her obedience. The way he had given her choices even when keeping her locked away would have been easier. I felt seen, she said quietly. These past few days. Like I was more than just someone who processes documents. Like my thoughts mattered. My skills mattered. I mattered. You did. You do. And now I'm back here, and it feels wrong. Like I left something important behind. Mateo's expression shifted. What did you leave behind? I don't know. Partnership, maybe. Or just the feeling that I was part of something bigger than translating contracts in my apartment alone. You are part of something bigger, Mateo said. You proved that when you found the pattern no one else saw. When you stood in that ballroom and refused to be intimidated. When you chose to trust me even though you had every reason not to. Kayla took a step toward him, then another. The space between them collapsed to inches. She could smell his cologne, could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, could feel the heat radiating off him in the cool apartment. What happens now? She asked. Now you tell me what you want, Mateo said, and I'll either give it to you or explain why I can't. Kayla thought about the past week, about fear and trust, and the strange intimacy that came from working beside someone who saw you as an equal, about the way her apartment felt empty without the sound of Mateo's voice in the next room. I want to know if this is real, she said. If what I'm feeling isn't just gratitude or proximity or some kind of trauma response, it's real, Mateo said simply. At least on my end. I don't confuse business with personal. I don't protect people because I want something from them. I protect people because they matter. And you matter more than you should. More than I should. More than is smart. More than is safe. More than makes sense given that we've known each other for a week. He lifted his hand slowly and brushed his thumb along her jaw. But real anyway. Kayla closed her eyes at the touch. When she opened them again, Mateo was watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak. I'm not asking for anything tonight, he said quietly. I just needed you to know where I stand, so you can decide where you want to stand. He stepped back, breaking the contact, picked up the envelope from the counter and set it on the table beside her. Payment and contracts are in there. You're still on retainer if you want to be. And if you decide you want to explore whatever this is between us, you call me. Not because I'm your employer, but because you want to. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the knob. The security stays in place regardless. You're protected whether we're just business partners or something more. That doesn't change. Then he left before she could respond. Kayla stood in her apartment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. Heard the elevator doors open and close. Walked to the window and watched him emerge onto the street below. Saw him speak briefly to the security team in the sedan, then climb into his own car. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and made a decision. Kayla spent January 4th trying to settle into a routine that refused to settle. She worked through the morning on a contract amendment, made lunch she picked at without appetite, and answered 3 texts from Courtney before finally agreeing to a video call at 2 p.m. Courtney's face filled the screen, concerned and impatient in equal measure. Okay, you've stalled long enough. What the hell happened? You disappear on Christmas Eve with some vague text about staying in the city, then go radio silent for over a week. Kayla leaned back against her couch. It's complicated. I gathered that from your complete inability to give me a straight answer. Courtney's expression softened slightly. Are you in trouble? Not anymore. Maybe. I don't know. That's not reassuring, Kay. Kayla ran her hand through her hair. Remember the client I've been translating for? The one who pays really well, but I never meet in person. The mysteriously wealthy Italian businessman. Yeah. Turns out his world is more complicated than real estate contracts. Kayla gave Courtney an edited version of the past 10 days. The roses. Ryan Foster. The security threats. The gala. She left out details that felt too dangerous to say aloud even over an encrypted call, but gave enough that Courtney could understand the shape of what had happened. When she finished, Courtney was silent for a long moment. Then she said, So you're telling me you're involved with a man who has enemies dangerous enough that you needed armed guards? I'm not involved with him, Kayla corrected. Not exactly. But you want to be. Kayla hesitated. Maybe. Kay, this is insane. You know that, right? This isn't some romance where the dangerous guy turns out to be misunderstood. This is real danger. Real consequences. I know. Kayla pulled a pillow onto her lap. But he also protected me when he didn't have to. Trusted me with information that could have gotten me killed if I'd mishandled it. Gave me choices instead of just making decisions for me. That's literally the bare minimum of decent behavior. In his world, it's more than most people get. Courtney sighed. What does your gut tell you? Kayla thought about Matteo standing in her apartment 2 nights ago. The honesty in his voice when he admitted what he felt. The way he had walked away instead of pushing for something she might have given out of obligation or confusion. My gut says he's dangerous, but not to me, Kayla said quietly. That whatever this is between us, it's real. And that I'd regret it if I didn't at least try to figure out what it could be. And if it goes wrong, if his enemies come back, if you get caught in something you can't control, then at least I'll know I made the choice myself instead of letting fear decide for me. Courtney's expression was complicated. Worried, but resigned. Okay, but I need you to promise me something. What? If this gets worse, if you feel unsafe, you call me, immediately. I don't care what time it is or what's happening. You call. I promise. They talked for another 20 minutes about safer topics. Courtney's new apartment in Brooklyn. The terrible dates she'd been on since the new year. Plans to meet for dinner once Kayla felt comfortable leaving her apartment without security shadowing her every move. When the call ended, Kayla felt lighter. Like saying the situation aloud had made it more real, and somehow more manageable. She made tea and returned to work, translating a property dispute with the kind of focus that came from deliberately not thinking about anything else. By 11 that night, she was exhausted. She showered, changed into comfortable clothes, and was brushing her teeth when she heard it. A sound from the hallway outside her apartment. Not footsteps. Something heavier. Metal against metal. Kayla froze, toothbrush still in her mouth. The building was old. Sounds carried in strange ways. It could be nothing. A neighbor coming home late. Maintenance working on something. Then she heard voices. Low. Urgent. Speaking a language that wasn't English. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She spit into the sink, rinsed quickly, and moved to the living room. The protocol Matteo's team had drilled into her played through her mind like a script she'd memorized without meaning to. Stay inside. Lock the door. Don't investigate. Let security handle it. She checked the deadbolt. Already locked. Checked the chain. In place. Then she grabbed her phone and opened the security app Matteo's team had installed. The camera feed from the building's main entrance showed 2 men in dark clothes and ski masks forcing the door open. One of them had something in his hand that looked like a crowbar. The other was speaking into a phone. Kayla's hand shook as she switched to the interior stairwell camera. The 2 men were already inside, moving up the stairs with purpose. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. She dialed the emergency number Matteo had given her. It rang once before someone answered. Ms. Richardson. Male voice. Calm. We see them. Stay inside. Lock your bedroom door and move away from windows. How long until? 90 seconds. We're already in the building. The line stayed open. Kayla moved to her bedroom, locked the door, and pressed herself against the wall farthest from the window. She could hear her own breathing, too fast and too loud, could hear the blood rushing in her ears. Then she heard something else. Footsteps on the stairs, faster now, running, shouting in Russian. A heavy thud, then another. Silence. Kayla's phone buzzed with a text. Threat neutralized. Stay where you are. Mr. Fontanelli is on his way. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, phone clutched in both hands. The apartment was silent, except for the distant sound of sirens approaching. She wondered if the neighbors had called the police. Wondered what explanation Mateo's team would give. Wondered how close those men had gotten to her door. 20 minutes later, she heard the familiar pattern of knocking. 3 short taps. Pause. 2 more. The signal Mateo's team had established, so she'd know it was them. Kayla unlocked the bedroom door, walked through her apartment on legs that barely held her weight, and checked the peephole. Mateo stood in the hallway. Not his security team. Him. She fumbled with the locks and chain, got the door open. He stepped inside and locked everything behind him before turning to look at her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Kayla shook her head. Words felt impossible. Through the frosted glass of the hallway window, she caught a brief flicker of blue and red reflecting off the opposite wall. Then it was gone. Mateo followed her gaze, his expression tightening into something calculated. "They're already leaving," he said quietly. "My men met them downstairs. Attempted break-in. No injuries. No reason for anyone to come up here." He didn't sound proud. He sounded practical, like he was sealing a door that should never have been opened in the first place. Mateo crossed the space between them in 3 steps and pulled her against his chest. Not asking permission, not giving her space to refuse. Just wrapping his arms around her and holding on like she might disappear if he let go. Kayla pressed her face against his shoulder and felt something break open inside her. The fear she'd been holding back since she heard that first sound in the hallway. The terror of knowing someone had been trying to reach her. The understanding that if Mateo's security hadn't been watching, those men would have succeeded. She didn't cry, just stood there shaking while he held her. One hand pressed against the back of her head, the other solid against her spine. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I underestimated them. The main organization pulled back, but I should have anticipated independent cells, smaller groups operating without oversight. Your team stopped them," Kayla said against his shoulder. "Before they even got close. They got into your building. That's too close." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. His eyes were darker than usual, fury tightly controlled beneath careful composure. "Pack a bag," he said. "You're not staying here tonight. Mateo, this isn't negotiable." His voice was firm but not harsh. "Those men are being handled. The police will be told they were attempting a robbery, but there's no guarantee they were working alone. I'm not leaving you here while we figure that out." Kayla wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could handle this. But the truth was, she was terrified. And Mateo's penthouse in Midtown had cameras and security and doors that locked with the kind of certainty her apartment's deadbolt could never match. "Okay," she said quietly. She packed quickly. Clothes, laptop, the essentials she'd need to keep working. Mateo waited by the door, speaking in low tones on his phone in Italian. When she emerged with her bag, he took it from her without asking and gestured toward the hallway. The building's stairwell showed signs of what had happened. A dent in the wall. Something dark on the floor that might have been blood. Kayla looked away and let Mateo guide her down to the street, where a car was already waiting. The drive to Midtown passed in silence. Kayla stared out the window at the city moving past, neon and streetlights blurring together. Mateo sat beside her, his hand resting on the seat between them. Not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. When they reached the penthouse, he set her bag in the guest room she'd stayed in before, and then led her to the kitchen. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Kayla had to think about it. Lunch. Maybe. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients without asking what she wanted. Within minutes, he had assembled a simple meal. Bread, cheese, fruit. Things that required no cooking but felt substantial anyway. "Eat," he said, setting the plate in front of her. Kayla picked at the food without appetite. Who were they? Remnants, Matteo said. The main Russian organization pulled back like I told you. But there are always people who don't follow orders, who see an opportunity for personal advancement or revenge and act independently. Why me? Why now? Because hurting you hurts me, and because they're desperate enough to try something the larger organization wouldn't approve of. He poured water into a glass and set it beside her plate. They won't try again. Not after tonight. How can you be sure? Matteo's expression went cold. Because I'm making an example. One that will be very clear to anyone else considering independent action. Kayla didn't ask what that meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. They sat in the kitchen while she forced herself to eat. Matteo didn't push conversation. Just stayed close. A solid presence in the chair across from her. When she finally pushed the plate away, he cleared it without comment and made tea that appeared at her elbow moments later. I should let you sleep, he said. I won't be able to. Then we'll sit here until you can. And they did. The city beyond the windows shifted from late night to early morning. The sky lightened by degrees, black to deep blue to the pale gray that preceded sunrise. Kayla curled into the corner of the couch in the living room, wrapped in a blanket Matteo had brought from somewhere. He sat in the chair nearby, close enough to reach but far enough to give her space. At some point, exhaustion won. Kayla's eyes drifted closed. When she opened them again, pale gold light filled the room, and Matteo was still there, watching the sunrise with the same intensity he brought to everything else. You didn't sleep, she said, her voice rough. I don't need much. Kayla sat up slowly, the blanket pooling around her waist. Matteo. He turned to look at her. I don't want to keep running from this, she said. From whatever this is between us. I spent all day yesterday trying to convince myself that going back to my normal life was the right choice, that keeping distance from you was safer, smarter. It probably is, Matteo said quietly. I don't care. Kayla stood and crossed to where he sat. I don't want safe if safe means pretending I don't feel something real. I don't want smart if smart means walking away from the first person who's made me feel like I matter in years. Matteo's eyes never left her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try this. Whatever this is. I want to build something with you that isn't just survival or protection or business. She took a breath. I want partnership. Trust. Something real. Matteo stood slowly. They were inches apart now. Close enough that Kayla could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. You understand what that means, he said. My world. My enemies, the constant calculation of risk. I understand that I'd rather face all of that with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. Matteo lifted his hand and traced his thumb along her jaw. The touch was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. I can't promise it will be easy, he said. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for honest. Then honestly, Matteo said, his voice dropping lower. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you holding those roses. Haven't been able to function normally knowing you were back in Astoria where I couldn't see you, couldn't protect you, couldn't just be near you. Kayla's breath caught. Then stop fighting it. Matteo's other hand came up to cup her face. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, when she instead tilted her face up toward his, he closed the final distance between them. The kiss was nothing like Kayla expected. Not demanding or possessive. Just warm and certain and inevitable. Like something that had been building between them since Christmas Eve and had finally found its moment. When they pulled apart, Matteo rested his forehead against hers. We do this right, he said quietly. Equal partners. Your voice matters as much as mine. Decisions that affect both of us get made together. Agreed, Kayla whispered. And you keep working. Keep your independence. I protect you, but I don't control you. Agreed. And if this gets too complicated, if my world becomes too much, you tell me. You don't just disappear. Kayla pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Matteo kissed her again. Slower this time. Deeper. When they finally broke apart, the sun had fully risen, flooding the penthouse with golden light that made everything feel new. 3 months passed, like pages turning in a book Kayla had never expected to read. Winter gave way to early spring. The city shed its gray shell and bloomed with that particular kind of energy that came with longer days and warmer air. Cherry blossoms appeared in Central Park. Street vendors returned to their corners. People walked without hunching against the cold. Kayla called her mother more often than she used to. Short, ordinary conversations about rain in Oregon and what was blooming in her yard, about the neighbor's dog and the price of groceries. Mateo never hovered. But every time Kayla hung up, he asked one simple question. All quiet? And every time his people confirmed it was. Discreet, uneventful, exactly how Kayla wanted it. Kayla woke in the penthouse on a Saturday morning in mid-April to sunlight streaming through windows she now thought of as hers. Not because Mateo had claimed her as a possession, but because she had chosen to build something here. In this space, with this man who still surprised her daily. She found him in the kitchen making coffee, dressed in jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Casual. Relaxed in a way he rarely was during the week when business demanded the armor of expensive suits and controlled expressions. Morning, he said without turning. He had learned the sound of her footsteps, could track her movement through the penthouse without looking. Morning. Kayla slid onto one of the stools at the island. Courtney's coming over at noon. I remember. I'll make myself scarce. You don't have to leave your own home. Mateo poured coffee into 2 cups and brought one to her. She's your friend. You should have space to talk without me hovering. You don't hover. He raised an eyebrow. I'm very aware of where you are at all times. That's hovering. That's caring, Kayla corrected. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. There's a difference. Over the past 3 months, they had found a rhythm that worked. Kayla had moved into the penthouse officially in late January, not because Mateo demanded it, but because her apartment in Astoria had stopped feeling like home the moment those men broke in. She kept her professional independence fiercely, expanded her client base beyond just Mateo's network, took on projects that interested her regardless of pay, built a reputation that was hers alone. Mateo had adjusted too. He consulted her on decisions that affected their shared life, asked her opinion on business matters that touched the legitimate side of his operations, stopped treating protection like something he imposed and started treating it like something they negotiated together. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when his world crashed into hers in ways that required adaptation. Still nights when he came home carrying tension she couldn't fully understand. Still decisions he made without her, because some things in his life existed in shadows she couldn't enter. But it was real, and real was more valuable than perfect. Courtney arrived exactly at noon carrying a bag of bagels and the kind of determined expression that meant she had questions prepared. Kayla let her in and watched her friend take in the penthouse with the same careful observation she'd brought to their friendship since college. So this is where you live now, Courtney said, setting the bag on the counter. This is it. It's huge and expensive and very much not you. Kayla laughed. Thanks? I mean, the decor isn't you, all this dark leather and minimalist art, but you look happy. That's you. They settled on the couch with coffee and bagels. Mateo had disappeared into his office as promised, giving them privacy. Courtney wasted no time. Okay, real talk. Are you actually okay here? Like genuinely okay, not just convincing yourself because it's safer than your apartment. I'm genuinely okay, Kayla said. Better than okay, actually. Because last time we talked, you were dealing with armed men breaking into your building and moving in with a guy you'd known for 2 weeks. It's been 3 months now. That's still not very long, Kay. Kayla set her coffee down. I know it sounds fast. I know it probably looks crazy from the outside. But Court, I've never had someone treat me like an equal partner the way Mateo does. He doesn't make decisions for me. He makes them with me. What about his work? The dangerous stuff? He keeps me separate from the parts that could hurt me. But he doesn't lie about what he does or pretend his world is something it's not. Kayla pulled her knees up onto the couch. I have my own work, my own clients, my own income. I'm not dependent on him financially or emotionally. I'm here because I choose to be. Courtney studied her for a long moment. You really love him. It wasn't a question, but Kayla answered anyway. Yeah, I really do. Does he love you back? He shows me every day, whether he says the words or not. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking about safer topics. Courtney's new job. The guy she'd been seeing who turned out to be terrible. Plans for summer trips they'd probably never take because work always interfered. Normal friendship things that reminded Kayla. Her life wasn't entirely consumed by Mateo's world. When Courtney left, she hugged Kayla tight at the door. I'm still worried about you. But I can see you're happy. And you're still you. That's what matters. I'm still me, Kayla agreed. Just me with better security. After Courtney left, Kayla found Mateo in his office reviewing documents on his laptop. She leaned against the doorframe and watched him work. The way his brow furrowed when he concentrated. The way his fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision he brought to everything. She likes you, Kayla said. Mateo looked up. I didn't see her. She saw enough. The way you left us alone. The way the apartment has some of my things mixed in now. Books on the shelves. Photos on the side table. Kayla walked into the office. She said I still seem like myself. You are yourself. I know, but it's good to hear it from someone who knew me before all this. Mateo saved his work and closed the laptop. Come here. Kayla crossed to him. He pulled her down onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist. She settled against him, comfortable in a way that had taken weeks to develop. I got a call this morning, he said against her hair. Business opportunity. Large scale. Very lucrative. Kayla felt something tighten in her chest. What kind of opportunity? The Cartel del Golfo wants to establish a partnership. Import-export through New York. Legitimate on the surface, but with connections to their larger operations in Mexico. He paused. It would require me to travel. Spend time in areas that aren't exactly stable. Probably several weeks total over the next few months. Kayla turned in his lap to face him. What did you tell them? Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first. This is your decision. Your business. It affects you, Mateo said, which makes it our decision. Kayla thought about what several weeks apart would mean. The worry, the risk, the way his world could turn violent in places where she couldn't reach him. She also thought about the kind of money and power a partnership like that would bring. The opportunities, the expansion of everything he'd built. What do you want to do? She asked. Mateo was quiet for a long moment. His hands rested on her hips, steady and warm. 6 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. The strategic value alone would have been worth any personal risk. And now I have something that matters more than strategy. He looked at her directly. I have you. I have this life we're building. And I'm not willing to gamble with that for business expansion. Kayla's throat tightened. You'd turn it down? I'd delegate it. Let someone I trust handle the travel and negotiations. Maintain oversight from here. Take a smaller cut of the profits in exchange for staying alive and staying with you. Your organization will think you're getting soft. My organization will see a leader who's strategic enough to delegate, instead of trying to control everything personally. That's not soft. That's smart. Kayla kissed him. Slow and deliberate. When they broke apart, she said, Then delegate. Build the partnership without putting yourself in danger. And come home to me every night. That's the plan. 2 weeks later, Mateo announced his decision to his inner circle. Kayla wasn't present for the meeting, but she heard about it afterward from the way Mateo came home looking both satisfied and exhausted. How did they take it? She asked. Better than expected. A few questions about whether I was losing my edge, but mostly acceptance that I'm thinking long-term instead of just short-term gain. And the cartel? They agreed to work with my representative. They're getting access to New York either way. They don't care who sits at the table as long as the results are the same. Kayla felt relief wash through her. So you're not going to Mexico. I'm not going anywhere except maybe Boston for a day meeting next month. And you're welcome to come if you want. To a business meeting? To the city. You can explore while I work. Then we'll get dinner somewhere that doesn't know my name. It was such a normal suggestion. Such a regular couple thing to do. Kayla found herself smiling. I'd like that. Spring deepened into the kind of weather that made New York feel livable. Kayla and Mateo fell into patterns that felt sustainable. Work during the day, dinners together most evenings, weekends that mixed business obligations with actual relaxation. They went to a gallery opening in Chelsea, had brunch in Brooklyn, spent a Sunday afternoon in Central Park doing absolutely nothing productive. On Sunday nights, she spoke to her mother with the windows cracked open and the city humming below. Sometimes she told Matteo about it afterward, and he would nod and say the watch in Oregon had been scaled back to a rotating pair. Still there, still invisible. The words should have made her feel trapped. Instead, they made her feel, for the first time in months, like her fear wasn't running the world anymore. Kayla's client list grew. She landed a contract with a publisher translating an Italian novel, took on legal work for 3 different firms, built a professional reputation that existed entirely separate from her connection to Matteo Fontanelli. One evening in late April, she was working at the dining table when Matteo came home earlier than usual. She looked up from her laptop. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine." He set his briefcase down and walked to where she sat. "I have something for you." He pulled a bouquet from behind his back. Red roses. A dozen of them wrapped in simple brown paper. Kayla stared at them, then at him. "Roses. I thought it was time to replace the memory," Matteo said quietly. "The first roses you got were a threat. A manipulation. These are a choice. From me to you. Because I want to give them. Not because I'm trying to gain access or control or anything else." Kayla stood and took the bouquet. The flowers were perfect. Fresh. The kind of simple beauty that didn't need embellishment. "You're giving me roses," she said, feeling emotion catch in her throat. "I'm giving you roses," Matteo confirmed, "and hopefully making you think of this moment instead of Ryan Foster every time you see them." Kayla set the bouquet on the table and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you." She'd said it before, but this time felt different. More settled, less like a confession and more like a simple truth. "I love you too," Matteo said against her hair. "Even when you laugh at me for being jealous. Even when you challenge every decision I make. Even when you refuse to let me protect you the way I want to. Especially then," Kayla corrected. "Especially then," he agreed. They stood in the middle of the penthouse, city lights beginning to glow beyond the windows as evening settled over New York. Kayla thought about Christmas Eve, about roses in a lobby, and fear that had turned into something else entirely, about the strange path that had led from danger to partnership to love. She'd never expected to find herself here, in the home of a man whose world operated in shadows, building a life that balanced legitimate work with the constant awareness of threat, learning to navigate power and protection and the complicated space between safety and freedom. But she'd also never felt more certain of anything. This was real. This was hers. This was the life she'd chosen and continued to choose every single day. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For the roses. For respecting my independence. For building something with me instead of just protecting me from everything." Matteo pulled back enough to look at her face. "Thank you for staying. For trusting me. For seeing past what I do to who I am. Who you are is enough," Kayla said. "So are you." They stayed like that as the city darkened fully beyond the windows. 2 people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and built something strong enough to survive. Not perfect, not safe, but real in a way that mattered more than either of those things. Later, they ate dinner at the kitchen island, worked side by side at the table, Kayla translating a contract while Matteo reviewed financial reports. Moved through the evening with the comfortable rhythm of people who had learned each other's patterns and chosen to build a life around them. Before bed, Kayla arranged the roses in a vase and set them on the table where she could see them while she worked. A reminder that danger could transform into something beautiful, that protection could evolve into partnership, that love could grow in the most unexpected soil if you gave it room to breathe. And when Matteo pulled her close that night, she fell asleep knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Equal partners in a world that rarely allowed for equality, building security not through isolation or control, but through trust and choice, and the stubborn belief that love was worth fighting for, even when it came wrapped in roses from a mafia boss who had learned to share power instead of just wielding it. Especially then.